My name's Sally Learey, and on behalf of the Geelong Regional Library Corporation, I'm delighted to welcome you to this inaugural Local Word Regional Showcase and today's event, Writing for Resilience in Children and Adults, with Heather Gallagher and Stef, Gemmill and myself. And I'd like to start by acknowledging the Wadawurrung and Eastern Ma original owners of the lands on which our library services operate. And we're going to pay respects to those Wadawurrung and Eastern Ma elders, past, present and emerging. We acknowledge and celebrate First Nations people of this land as the custodians of learning, literacy, knowledge and story. Local Word is supported by our principal sponsor, Deakin University, and the City of Greater Geelong. And today's event is also supported by South Geelong Farmers Market. So thank you to the sponsors, without whom this event would not be possible. I would like to introduce you to our panellists now. So first of all, Heather. So Heather Gallagher is a children's author and award-winning journalist. Her picture book, Happy Pants, Why Is Mummy So Sad?, was inspired by her experience with postnatal depression. Keen to break down the stigma, Heather has spoken at many events about her experiences with mental illness. Happy Pants was a recommended title in the Australian Family Therapists Awards for Children's Literature. Heather is also passionate about child literacy, and she works as a writer in residence at disadvantaged primary schools with the educational charity Ardoch. Her latest picture book, Scaredy Cat, is based on her anxious dog, Pip. Welcome, Heather.
Thank you.
Stef Gemmill is an award-winning author of children's picture books and middle grade fiction. Previously, she was a Montessori teacher, a music journalist, and a technical writer. And she swapped that mosh pit for toys and tantrums and turned her pen to writing issues-based children's stories. Stef's award-winning book, A Home for Luna, is a story of homelessness and change, and it is a reflection of her time living with a foster family. Her latest picture book, Toy Mountain, is aimed at children looking for ways to help our environmental war on waste. Sally Learey, me, is the author of 8 books. 7 are children's picture books. Those books are a combination of fact and fiction. 2 of them are about food allergies in children, one about celiac disease and one about nut allergies and anaphylaxis. And her other 5 books are about locations like Melbourne and Geelong, Ballarat and Lorne. And these location books connect children with community. Her non-fiction adult personal development book is called Overcoming Problems, and it's about how to grow resilience and emotional intelligence in adults, or indeed 14 years and up. 2 of her children's picture books are listed on the Victorian Premier's Reading Challenge book list. Sally's also a keynote speaker, a workshop facilitator, a conference presenter, and an executive coach. And today she has 2 roles. So she will be involved as a panellist as well as a panel chair. So you'll see me swapping hats as we go through. So to begin our panel discussion, we wanted to share 2 definitions, and we've simplified those definitions for the purposes of this discussion. Resilience. Resilience is the ability to bounce back from adverse life events. And emotional intelligence? Emotional intelligence is the ability to recognise and to regulate our emotions. And books provide the tools to develop these abilities. So I'm going to start our panel discussion now with a series of questions. And later on there will be an opportunity for Q&A for you to ask questions of the panellists, and we would actually love that. So please start thinking of what you might like to ask as we progress with the discussion.
Sorry, Sally, can I just interrupt for 1 second?
Of course.
Tim, there's just some sound coming out of this speaker. Are you able to... You can't fix that. Okay, no worries. As you were.
So I'm going to ask this question of both Stef and Heather, and Stef, I'm going to start with you. Did you set out to write books that would support children's social and emotional learning?
Well, in writing children's books, I'm definitely influenced by my background in Montessori teaching. One of the core principles of the Montessori education method is that between the ages of 0 to 6, children are very absorbent and have this high absorption rate in their development. Ages 0 to 3, it's within their subconscious level of development, so they are like little sponges and absorb the world around them. Ages 3 to 6, it's in their conscious mind. So they're very curious, they have this high absorption rate in terms of their physical development, their emotional development, their social development. And they're very curious, very inquisitive. And it's this age that I love to write for. They're really big thinkers at that age, so you can present them with some quite tough topics, but in relatable ways. So for example, A Home for Luna, so that's my award-winning story, which is about homelessness and change, and a deeper level, it's about the refugee crisis as well. It's this really tough topic, but I have the central character is a shipwrecked cat that then learns to adapt to live with a family of penguins. Children have a lot of empathy for animals, so I used animal characters. And children can relate to that because they are exposed to change all the time as well. We ask a lot of children. They're certainly more flexible than us in some ways. So, go to childcare while we go to work. They go to kinder, then they're off to school, then they change classrooms, then they move house, they move bedrooms, they may have 2 homes, they may have stepsisters. So it's this age that I love to write for. They have deep imaginations too. One of the reasons I wrote in my dreams was between that age of 3 to 6, I think it was when I was 4, I realised I had this quite a wild imagination. I dreamed deeply and I had nightmares I did not understand, and that's one of the reasons I wrote in my dreams as well, to create these some insights into dreams and embracing your imagination and some strategies for overcoming nightmares. Yeah, so I really love that curiosity of that age.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. That was really comprehensive and interesting. And Heather, what about you? Did you set out to write books that would support children's social and emotional learning?
No, I didn't, Sally. It was actually a happy accident. After I suffered postnatal depression with both my children, various therapists and people that I came into contact with were like, you should write a book about this, because, you know, I was a journalist and I was striving to write children's literature. But I kind of shied away from it for a couple of reasons. One was, why would I want to think about depression? I'm trying to get out of that. And the other one was, I just didn't know how to do it, how to broach it. And it was actually while I was in the midst of what I would probably say is my worst ever bout of depression, which is when I first relocated from Melbourne to Ocean Grove, and the kids were wrapped with their new school. We moved because my husband got a fancy new job at Deakin Uni, and I was home alone receiving numerous rejections. You'd know that feeling, Stef, for my writing, and feeling very disconnected from the community and just really lost. And I kept saying to myself, I've just got to put on my happy pants and go out and force myself to see people. And that was the light bulb moment where I went, aha, what a great metaphor to explain it to kids. And that story actually, once I sort of had that initial idea, came to me quite quickly. And you'll see in the story, it's basically about a mum who does all these lovely things with her child when she's wearing her happy pants, but when the baby comes home, the happy pants stay in the wardrobe, and the child tries to get mum to kind of put her happy pants on and re-engage with life. And anyway, I'll talk more about that later, but that was sort of how that one came about. And then with Scaredy Cat, based, as Sally said, on my anxious dog, that was another sort of spontaneous moment where Pip, who is terrified of other dogs, went and hid in the dunes from me. And when he came back to me, I was like, Pip, why do you have to be such a scaredy cat all the time? And it was another one of those sort of light bulb moments where I was like, he's afraid of this and afraid of that. That sounds pretty cool.
It's a great rhyme.
Yeah. And it went from there. So
Fantastic. And I just want to talk about, I love the put on my happy pants, because often we say, I'm going to put on my grown-up pants and I'm going to get out there and do what I need to do. So it's something that really, I think, connects with people and with kids as well and adults. So it's a really nice, fun way of dealing with a topic that's not so much fun and being able to lighten it up but also open up conversations, I imagine. Yeah, fantastic, thank you. So our next question is, how can books foster emotional intelligence in adults? And I'm going to respond to that because I've written a book about emotional intelligence in adults. So this book here, Overcoming Problems, Effective Steps and Strategies to Create Your Blockbuster Life. And essentially, books can foster emotional intelligence because they are a tool to educate us. Now, I don't know about the rest of you, but most adults I speak to did not grow up on a diet of emotional intelligence. No, we didn't grow up with our parents saying, Sally, please just tell me a little bit more about what emotions are you feeling, honey? And when I've said, no, and another one, and let's just break that down. That's not something that we grew up on because people didn't realise the value of emotions. Would you agree? Yeah. And so essentially here we are living in the 21st century, and what the early philosophers knew, Plato for example, they knew because they wrote about quotes to do with all learning has an emotional base. So we're a little bit behind the eight ball. Now we've discovered that this concept called emotional intelligence, or EQ, is actually just as, or if not more important than IQ, or emotional intelligence. But the thing is, how do we learn about it? So books are the answer, because books hold information, books hold story, books hold strategy, books hold tools and techniques. And so as an adult, it's like, hey, I'm going to jump into some, bit of a curriculum here, and it's going to be through a book. And the beautiful thing about a book is, especially if you own a book, you can dip in and dip out of that book. You don't just read it and return it, although that's amazing to have libraries to be able to do that as well. But it's about saying, I just need a reminder. Today I'm feeling super angry right now, or super anxious. What do I need to do again? Hang on a minute, I'm just going to get my book. All right, so it's kind of like a book is almost a best friend or a companion. The other thing books don't do is they don't judge. They allow you to learn at your own pace. as well. And so as far as incorporating emotional intelligence into books, and there are a lot of books out there now, some are quite academic. So if you're wanting to learn about emotional intelligence and the academia around it, you might go to Dan Goleman's research, for example, or you might go to John Gottman's research around emotional intelligence in parenting and families. This book is very simple, and it's basically conversation style, almost as if someone's talking to you, and it gives the reader opportunities to actually say, well, I do want to know more about emotional intelligence, but I don't know a lot. How do I start? So it's literally giving knowledge. And as we mentioned in our definition, emotional intelligence is about being able to recognise what you're feeling and then being able to regulate, which means move it to a different emotion. Yep. So life, of course, throws us challenges. Who's ever had a challenge? Okay. Of course, all of us. And what we want to do is, I suppose, normalise that life is full of challenges. Yeah. And even the challenges that Heather and Stef were talking about in their kids' books. We want to normalise that. We want to have discussions around that. We want people to actually feel that they can talk about their journey and talk about their story, and feel that they can then allow others to do the same. I think we've done that reasonably well with depression in society. I think we're starting to talk about that, maybe not so much postnatal depression. So this is around saying, instead of, some of us grew up with, if you haven't got anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. And if you're not happy, I don't want to hear about it. Emotional intelligence says, hey, I want to know all the emotions, good, bad and ugly. Name them. I want to hear them. What are you feeling? Are you feeling anger, frustration? Are you feeling overwhelm? Are you feeling disgust? Are you feeling annoyance? Are you feeling joy? Are you feeling gratitude? Are you feeling patient? Are you feeling hopeful? All right, so what it's saying is we now realise the value of actually acknowledging our emotions. And there's a saying in emotional intelligence circles, name it to tame it. And that's so critical, because the minute you can say, I feel anger, the anger no longer owns you or has a hold on you. And that's the first part. So, books are there to help us, because I don't know if you knew this, there are about 600 words in the English language for emotions. And the average person probably has about a vocab of about 20. And so what we need to do is have a tool to help us. How do I become more emotionally intelligent? And books can help you do that. So they can increase what we call your emotional literacy by saying, I want to use different language to share my emotions. So emotional intelligence is suggesting that you become quite intimate with how you're feeling. So regularly ask yourself as you're travelling through your day, how am I feeling? And if you're feeling anger or you're feeling jealousy, it's okay to say I'm feeling anger, I'm feeling jealousy. In fact, it's not just okay, it's super important. Because once you name it and tame it, you can then start to learn how to regulate. So the key of emotional intelligence is really being able to feel a feeling but not having to act on it. Does that make sense? Because if I feel anger, I might yell and scream at the next person that asks me something. Does that sound familiar and reasonable? Yep. And so once I've named the anger, I can then recognise it and go, oh, I'm feeling anger right now. How's that going to serve me throughout my day? How's that going to serve me with the challenge I've got right now? How's that going to serve me to help me to solve this problem? So really, it is about supporting you to realise there are different intelligences. Emotions are data. Check in regularly. And then what we get to do, which I think is amazing, we get to actually be able to modulate our emotions, so turn them up or turn them down, and we get to choose, do I want to keep feeling that way or do I want to feel something else? So I remember the first time, I have a son with special needs, and I remember the first time he yelled at the top of his voice, "I feel angry." And I said, "Oh, that's so good, buddy. Oh, congratulations." Because he verbalised it rather than acting it out. Yep. And that was a turning point. So as adults, we might feel a little bit intimidated sometimes. I don't know anything about this. I'm not sure what to do. Well, the beauty of learning is that we keep learning until the day we die. And so as an adult, you can say, I want to know a bit more about this, so I'm going to grab a book. And I'm going to grab a book that will invite me, support me, get me to ask questions, maybe get me to feel a little bit uncomfortable, hold me at the same time, so that I'm able to really examine my emotions instead of hiding them. Yep. Because I'm just trying to think in this book as well with emotions, because some of those emotions aren't pretty. So even emotions like blame, you know, that's an emotional state. When we blame other people, and we actually give our power away when we do that, or when we deny, there's no problem here. When we deny that, that disempowers us as well. And we're maybe not used to actually going, oh, how do I deal with that? So what I thought I would do is just read a couple of pieces out, just so that you can see, because it's one thing is naming the emotion, but the other thing is, well, what am I going to do with it? You know, how do I regulate? So funnily enough, I actually look at this quite regularly, even though I wrote it, and remind myself of what I need to do. And I'm just going to start with worry, because I actually have quite an unwell, my amazing young man has been quite unwell lately. And it's so hard not to worry, isn't it? When you have a problem, I don't care if it's someone unwell, or if it's you're feeling overwhelmed, or you're feeling like, oh my God, my life's going to end and everything's a disaster. So I thought that worry would be a really helpful
Worry is a good one,
page.
Sally, absolutely. It can be very all-consuming.
Absolutely it can. And in fact, my first sentence is, worry is a destructive habit. It leads to stress. We all know that. You remember stress? It leads to things like headaches or anxiety or stomach pains or general ill health, which leads to more stress, and then we get into a cycle. Yep, who's familiar with that? Okay. So worry is actually a draining emotion, and it would be great, wouldn't it, to eliminate it from your life? And worry can actually be caused by something we were talking about just before, which is overthinking. So when we overthink our problem and ruminate on it, yep, that causes us to worry, and our mind's going crazy. So the key is to learn how to quieten your mind. So who's heard of mindfulness and breath work? A couple of people. So a really great strategy is to say, I feel worried. Remember, name it to tame it. I feel worried right now. I feel worried. I'm naming it, I'm owning it, I'm stepping into it. What can I do? Well, I'm going to maybe sit in a comfortable position. I'm going to do some breath work. I'm going to take some slow, deep breaths in and some slow, deep breaths out. And I'm going to use that process to change my physiology and calm down my body and release the tension, because often we also carry the tension in our muscles, don't we? Or in certain parts of our body. The beautiful thing about this exercise is you can do it anywhere, anytime, right? Because we carry our breath with us. So you can go anywhere and do that. And the other thing about this strategy is that you can not only do it when you feel worried, but you can do it each day to prevent you feeling those emotions. So the other strategy here is to actually, when you've done some calming, is to then say, rightio, I'm going to use a strategy and I'm going to get all of those worrying thoughts out of my brain. I'm going to write them down. Right? Now, whether you are a person who likes pen and paper, I am. I journal a lot. Some people like to just do it on their device. So you write down all your worries, every single one, and then you might take a break, and then you'll come back with fresh eyes, and then you'll look at them and say, are these probable? Are these likely to happen? Or have I kind of catastrophized them? Right? So in other words, you're actually putting them in perspective and saying, is that something that is 90% going to happen? Or is it 90% not going to happen? So it's about deciding it may or may not, and if it may not, why is it even there? So in that case, I'm going to stop worrying about that thing because it's likely not to happen. And I'm just going to focus on the things that actually are real. The other thing that I talk about, and that's really helpful, is to realise that some of our worries are what-if worries. What if? Yeah, I mean, my son had a procedure in hospital last week. He was in hospital for a week. So I could have said, what if he has an allergic reaction to the medication? What if he has a meltdown? What if we turn up and it's the wrong day? What if he suddenly won't get out of the car? Does this make sense? And I'm creating worries that aren't even real. And our mind's very good at that because it tries to protect us. So this suggests to actually analyse what you've written down and ask yourself, am I creating some of these or are they real? And when you've actually, I guess, examined your worries, you'll then be able to decide, are they worth focusing on or not? And if they are worth focusing on, then it's, well, how can I turn that worry into something else that enables me to use my energy on solving it or sorting it out or coping with it? Does that make sense? And so there are a lot of emotions in this book that are helpful emotions, and I'm going to talk about gratitude as one of them. So in fact, I'm just thinking about my son and I, before we went into hospital, we actually spoke about all the things we were grateful for. So we were grateful for the fact that we were going in, we were grateful for all the nurses and all the doctors. When we got in, we had the most amazing room. It was like the CEO suite. We were so grateful for that. We were grateful for the view. And gratitude softens and takes the focus off those other emotions. Does that make sense? And so that's another thing. It's so important to say, I feel gratitude. Yeah. So when we are learning as adults about emotional intelligence, we can actually intentionally grow or foster the positive emotions in our mind. All right? A simple strategy, wake up each morning and you say a couple of things you're grateful for. Go to bed each night and you say a couple of things that you're grateful for about your day. I do remember a time when that was hard for me, and I did say, I'm grateful I'm breathing, because that was all I could find at that point in time. And that's okay, because our mind then gets into a space of looking for more things to be grateful for, even when we're sleeping. So I think books are the tool. Maybe not just, I'm holding this book up because this is the one I'm super familiar with. But books are such a wonderful tool as adults to support us to educate ourselves. And really, emotional intelligence is a skill. Unlike intelligence quotient, we're born with an IQ. With EQ, we're born with a natural set point, but we can learn the skills to increase it at any age, at any stage of life. So it really, really supports, goes hand in hand with resilience, which is what we're going to talk about shortly. because it enables us to stay nice and calm, choose an emotion that supports us to then say, how am I going to work through this challenge or this problem? The other thing that I want to say before we move on is a little strategy that I talk about in my book called pressing the pause button. So when you do name the feeling, let's just say anger, and you feel yourself about to literally do what you do, whatever that is, some people hide, some people rage, some people flee, some people deny. If you press your pause button, you say, I'm actually not going to even respond or react to that right now. I'm just going to focus on calming myself down. Yep. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to go, I feel anger. All right, now I get to choose what to do with that. So it's much more empowering than just kind of going through what our subconscious would tell us. When you feel anger, you need to yell or hit someone or run or scream or fight or flee. Yeah? Or have a glass of wine. So, that is my piece on that question. And I'm wanting to segue into another question now, which is, why do you think books are such good tools to help children emotionally? And Heather, I might ask you.
Thanks, Sally. That was great.
Thank you.
I want to take you home with me. Don't take that the wrong way. I think just leading on from what Sally said, we as adults can, have the role of introducing to children to books straight up. And, ideally, if children are brought up with books and, have books around as part of their lives, then they get to grow up and use Sally's amazing self-help book. But, for me, and picture books, which I particularly am passionate about, I think the beauty of picture books is that they're actually designed to be read aloud to children. So they're designed for you to cuddle up with your child, for your child to feel safe, to create a routine. And even in a sort of classroom situation, there's a sense of a shared experience when you're reading a story to children. The other thing I would say is that with the sort of books that we're talking about today, they can open up opportunities for discussion. And it's that thing that you were saying, Sally, about normalising particular difficulties. Everyone has challenges, but when you're a kid, you don't quite have the emotional intelligence yet to understand that. So you can feel very alone and isolated with whatever your particular issue happens to be. So to see a character dealing with that issue in a book is very, very reassuring and empowering. So I'd say that. I'd also say, leading on from that, when you get to, in picture books, but also when you get to sort of longer form fiction, usually stories are about characters that have some sort of problem or some sort of issue that they need to overcome. And for those of you familiar with the way narrative structure works, the traditional structure is that a character will struggle and attempt 3 times before usually being successful in whatever it is that they're trying to achieve. And I think this is also really good for kids to see that, if at first you don't succeed, try and try again. And also
things don't always come easy in life. We need to keep stepping up, and we need to keep trying and keep on keeping on. And I think that's another really good thing that kids get from books. Also, there's a movement, and I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with it, called We Need Diverse Books. So there's this growing wealth of books that show children from different backgrounds, whether that's ethnicity or ability, or whether it's children that are on the spectrum. We're seeing all sorts of different children that are reflecting back the reality of the world that we live in. And I think that is a really great tool that builds on resilience as well. And just my final point is, and maybe this is a little bit depressing, I don't know, see what you think. Books are there for you always in a way that sometimes people are not. So I don't know about you guys, but I have what I call my comfort reads, which I, if I'm having a particularly difficult time, I'll pull out. It's usually something, written for kids. Kate D. Gemmill was one of my absolute favourite children's authors, so I'll pull out, Flora and Ulysses is one of my favourites. Because of Winn-Dixie is another one of my favourites. I wouldn't say I'm particularly getting any kind of deep messages from these books, especially, but it's just the comfort of reading for me, and I think that's a really lovely thing that we can share with children.
I love that idea, and actually I will come home with you because for my 21st birthday I requested a series of children's picture books, I remember, and it was kind of like, what is wrong with her? Because I adore children's picture books, and it's so nice to hear that somebody else, maybe you don't need to do it secretly, I do, does that. And in fact, I don't know who else has their childhood picture books still. Yep. Yeah, me too. I've had some of them. The spine has needed to be repaired, and so on and so forth. But I love that idea. Thank you so much for sharing.
My go-to book when I'm having a bad day is Tomorrow is a Brand New Day by Davina Bell, and there's a particular page where there's a young girl who has cut the cat's fur, the dog's fur, the baby brother's hair, and cut her own hair, and it's an absolute horror mess, and it is tomorrow is a brand new day, the hair will grow out.
Maybe not quite tomorrow.
Yeah, and it makes me feel better. So, yeah, picture books can certainly enlighten you on a bad day as well.
Yeah, and they're not just for kids, I suppose, is the message as well. Yeah. Stef, I might just ask you, do you want me to ask the question again for clarity?
Yeah, that would be great, thanks.
So why do you think books are such good tools to help children emotionally?
Yeah, well, even adding to what Heather was saying, that, they are that the picture books in particular are there to read to children, and the discussion sometimes is as valuable as reading the book. Most of our books come out with, I know Heather and my books come out with teacher notes as well, and on our websites we've got the teacher notes, and on our publishers' sites, and there's a whole raft of questions and discussion points that you can have with children about the particular themes our books are about, so those discussions are important. But in particular with picture books, children love to see themselves in a book. They like to read or be read to about characters' struggles, whether it's a a person, a boy or a girl their age, or an animal that they see themselves reflected in, to have similar struggles to themselves, whether it's about bullying or something, a grief, something sad that's happened to them, moving house. Yeah, and they can look at a picture book and they can visualise themselves in that particular picture book. And as Heather was talking to as well, by their nature, structurally, picture books have a narrative arc where you've got this main character, the protagonist, who's generally a child in children's picture books, that needs to overcome this obstacle or a problem. And then there's multiple problems they have to overcome. And particularly with picture books, most of them don't have adults in them. It's this child-centric world. And the child is solving the problem. If there are adults, they're not solving the problem. It is very, very child-centric. And on reflection, Toy Mountain is very child-centric. So Toy Mountain has a theme of having a sustainable environment. And at the centre of the story is 4-year-old Sam. 4-year-old Sam is very tired of his hand-me-down toys, handed down to him from his grandma, and he gets this opportunity to become a toy tester, which I think is every child's dream. And he starts off getting some toys from the Tiny Hands Toy Factory to test. And everything starts off all very fun and exciting, but then he ends up with hundreds of toys. And what he does eventually realise is that they are plastic, low-quality toys, and he ends up with this mountain of plastic junk. Sam, the character, then has this realisation that he is creating an impact on the environment. There's plastic junk hogging up streams and rivers, and it impacts his family as well. Do we have grandparents and parents in the room? Yes, with grandkids and children that perhaps have too many toys. Have you ever walked into the living room? It's strewn with Lego. Well, in this story, the family actually has to move out of their house. They have so many toys. But then it's the focus at the end is Sam has this realisation that he can control his consumer choices. He can stop this crazy train that he's riding, and he has control over his decisions as well. And I think that is the power of a picture book, is that children can see these relatable characters and relatable problems, and then they form a view of what is a good decision, what is a poor decision, and of course by their nature as well, structurally there's a resolution at the end of a picture book and a happy ending. But yeah, it's not all rainbows and sunshine. There's storms to weather, there's problems to solve, and it is a reflection of true life, and that is the beauty and power of a picture book.
Absolutely, and I just wonder whether you've received any letters from kids that have actually said, oh, guess what, after I read that, I said I don't want plastic toys anymore. Have you ever had anything like that?
Yeah, look, I do author visits and have talks with kids, and yeah, they do get frustrated with low quality toys, but it does give them something to consider. It really creates some really interesting topics of conversation. They may not give up toys, but then they start considering ways of recycling toys, of fixing their toys. They love the idea of actually fixing toys and not throwing things into the rubbish. And then we have conversations around, how long does it take for a plastic bag to break down in landfill? They know what landfill is. They have these bins at school. And it makes them think really deeply about, I had no idea it takes 200 years for a plastic bag to break down, as opposed to something that can be recycled, and they look at that life cycle of recycling, and that it's very satisfying for them as well, to be able to have an impact on the world. It's their world. Yeah, so, yeah, I don't know if they would actually give up the Lego, but you'll be happy to hear that all Lego is that made since I think the last 10 years is now recyclable.
Yes, it is indeed. And just speaking of Lego, Lego is a great emotional intelligence tool because it's got all the little faces of all the emotions. So well before emojis came about, we had Lego to actually teach us about emotions. So I just thought I'd sneak that in. Yeah, well, I mean, what a beautiful message around realising that picture books have got the power for kids to be introduced to these really important topics about how do we want to shape our world and our environment, and the role that I can play as one human being to be able to make a change, and just raising awareness around that too. So thank you. I'm going to move on to our next question, and Heather, I'm going to ask you first, and that is, as an author, how do you hope that your books help build resilience in children?
Thanks, Sally. So as I said before, that sense of seeing your story reflected on the page is so powerful and relieving. And I've had sort of kinder teachers tell me that they've had this experience reading Happy Pants to groups of kids. You know, there might be, you know, statistically, you know, at least probably 3 kids in every class is going to have a parent that's either got depression or has had depression. And, you know, even though my story is based on postnatal depression, it kind of works for depression across the board. Yeah, I feel quite proud that the story does provide some comfort to kids, and it ends with mum sort of getting help and well, I'm allowed to do spoilers, aren't I? In the climax of the story, the happy pants, the child steals the happy pants and they rip on a nail in his cubby. And when mum goes off to the doctor with dad to get some help, good old Gran sews up the happy pants. So the final spread is this lovely picture of mum wearing the happy pants, which are now shorts, thanks to Gran's handy mending. So there's that sign of things, you know, things, you come out the other side. You know, we go through these things, but we generally come out the other side. And my hope is that the book allows children to talk about these things because, you know, cliche as it is, a problem shared is a problem halved. And the other thing about Happy Pants, incidentally, is that I know it's been used by the Raphael Centre for adult groups to get parents talking about the issue, you know, parents of new babies, particularly in dads groups, because we all know that, you know, I was going to make a very sexist comment then. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Sometimes men can find it more difficult to talk about these things. That's a very broad generalisation, and I apologise to the men present. I'm sure you're very emotionally intelligent, especially after today's event. But yeah, it encourages men to talk about the differences in your relationship after you've had a baby. Like having a baby really impacts on relationships, and that's not something that people talk about in the excitement of the arrival of the new baby. So it gives people permission to talk about things, which I think is really important. And with Scaredy Cat, it's the same deal. I mean, Scaredy Cat is a lot more lighthearted than Happy Pants, but it's still basically about anxiety. And anxiety, as we all know, is an epidemic in our communities at the moment, particularly with children, particularly in the COVID era. So being able to talk about what makes you scared is also, I think, incredibly empowering. So yeah, that's my hope, is that my books are achieving that function.
Thank you, and I'm sure they are. And I just want to talk to something that you mentioned, because of course we're talking about resilience, which is our definition is the ability to bounce back from adversity. And I love how in Happy Pants, Mum gets some help, because we need to understand that resilience doesn't mean I have to do it all by myself. Resilience means that I use strategies and tools and supports and resources to enable me to bounce back. And I think that's really important, to be able to normalise that as well, and almost to get people to understand that it's actually courageous to do that as well. And so, once again, so many messages in picture books about resilience. Thanks, Heather. And Stef, I might ask you the question, what do you think, as an author rather, how do you hope that your books help build resilience in children?
Well, Sally, as you've alluded to, building resilience, books can help build a toolkit of strategies for adults and for children on how to tackle problems. But children are really deep thinkers, and they will take these big world problems around us on their shoulders. And it can create a lot of anxiety and worry in children. And adults don't have the answer to a lot of these big world problems. So take, for example, we've got an oil and gas crisis currently. I don't know anyone that's not talking about the price of petrol. It's all in the news that we need more sustainable ways for our power and energy supplies globally, and it's everywhere. And then also we've got climate change as a hot topic. We have weather events like we've never seen before. We had some extreme bushfires in Victoria a couple of years ago, which really impact people's homes and industries. And now we're having these floods and rain events. We have family, friends impacted. We can see farms will take years to recover from this. We've got roads closed all around us. I think we're preparing for another big heavy downpour this afternoon. This is something our children are experiencing, and it creates climate anxiety. It's now a recognised global mental health issue, is climate anxiety. So how do we help children build resilience to climate anxiety? And the beauty of picture books is that it can take some of these big macro level world problems down to a micro level that creates meaning, that's meaningful for a child. So, for example, creating a sustainable environment or tackling climate change. There are picture books out there which will bring that down to their backyard environment, a story that is in their own backyard, about bushfires, about what they can do to support their environment. Toy Mountain, there's strategies in there that Sam has to reduce his waste, and it creates that discussion point for children around, well, what could you do to create a more sustainable environment? You could recycle. You could consider your consumer choices. You can plant a tree. You can use a refillable drink bottle. Children find it so satisfying when they can make this little small change in the world. And it also gets the children to focus on what do they have control of as well. So it puts the power in the child's hand of, I can make these decisions for myself. I can choose to recycle. I can choose to not use cling film. They're really good at giving us advice on what we should be doing as well. Like, you know, leave the car at home and ride a bike, or so I think the picture books in
From
particular.
Torquay to Geelong.
Yeah, a little bit long. It's amazing how far kids do ride their bikes, but yeah, it's the picture books just have such powerful messages, and children really take it on board.
What about you, Sally?
What about me? So how does, thanks very much for that Stef. I know that I've got cling wrap that I discovered the other day, and I'm like, that hasn't been touched forever because of all the other reusable containers that we use now. And it's just, you know, we talk about parents being a role model. Children are role models too for parents. They start to dictate how it needs to be. So how do I hope that my book builds resilience in adults, or indeed really teenagers to adults, because I would give this book to a 14-year-old to read? It is about using a process. So it's about saying, I've got a problem, I've got a challenge, that's okay. One day you might even get to, I'm excited about that. Right? I've got a problem, I'm excited about solving it. I am at that stage now. After a period of time.
I'm sorry, that's just weird.
I know, I know. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about process. So the first process is around reframing. So we have this negative attachment and negative definition to the word problem or challenge or adversity, that it's bad. Would you agree? Whereas if you reframe it and you say, there's always an opportunity hidden within a problem. Right? So what I'm going to do is solve this problem, find the opportunity, and I'm actually going to grow and develop and be better off than if I had not had the problem. Yep. And so it's about taking what you feel about problems and flipping it. So I'm just going to give you a favourite quote of mine. Problems are opportunities disguised in work clothes. Which is exactly what they are. You've got to put in the work. So having a process or a strategy, reframing is really important. Your self-talk is really important. So when you have a problem, going straight to, what am I telling myself? Oh my God, I'm no good at this. I hate problems. Why does it always happen to me? Etc., etc. That's not helpful. Let's flip it. Actually, I've got the tools and the strategies to solve this. I'm excited to uncover what the solution is. I'm excited to use my strategies and grow my resilience and use my emotional intelligence. Reflection is really important as well, using the skill. What did I use last time? Oh, maybe I could try that again. And then the main strategy is having a process of knowing how to solve a problem. And interestingly enough, and scarily enough, most people don't. They don't have a go-to process. So I've created a process because when we say, I've got a problem, I know what to do, I go straight to the process, it eliminates all of those emotions, strong negative emotions, sabotaging and hijacking, and it puts your focus on how I'm going to move forward with solving it, rather than staying in the drama glue of the problem. Yeah? Because, how many people can I tell? Right? That's not going to move me forward. So instead, I go to a process. And my process is actually called Act Today, and I made made bookmarks because I thought they were really, really helpful, and it relates to books as well. So I'm like, it's really cool to be able to have it and stick it in a book. And Act Today tells you when to solve your problem. Don't wait, do it now. And it's also an acronym, and it's an acronym for the 8 steps to solving problems. And the A stands for aware of and admit to having a problem. And once again, I want to talk about that because a lot of people think, but if I admit that I have a problem, I'm a problem. And I want to make a clear distinction. That's not true. Do you know why? Because no amazing human being can ever be a problem. People aren't problems, right? So admitting that you have a problem and acknowledging that you have a problem is empowering, because then you've got something to deal with. Yeah? It's not you. It's never you. People say, oh, but you don't understand, Sally, it is. It's my partner. It's my kids. It's my boss. And I say, well, hang on a minute. Let's talk about that by going to the next step, which is the C, which says clarify the problem. And that means let's actually talk about what is the issue with your kids. Because it's going to be something around what they say or don't say, or what they do or don't do. Yeah? There's nothing wrong with your kids. It's going to be about a behaviour in a person. Does that make sense? And so once we can actually clarify what that is, so let's just go to the toys. You know, my problem is, or the problem I have is that my kids don't pack up their toys after they've played with them, and I have to tell them over and over again, and I'm tired of it. Yep, that's the problem. It's not the kids. So when you clarify it, you go, that's what I'm solving. Yeah, I'm not putting my kids on eBay. I actually need to make sure that a lot of people don't clarify the problem correctly, so they never come to a solution because they're trying to solve the wrong thing. So the T stands for time to ask what I call quality questions, and these are questions that are a little bit unusual. They're questions like, what's good about my problem? What parts of my problem haven't I seen yet? What strategies can I draw on that I've used before to solve this problem? What character strengths do I need? What emotions do I need? What skills do I need? Who are some people or resources that I could chat to? And so on and so forth. All right, so it's just really important that if we're going to solve a problem, we need to ask ourselves questions about it, because the amazing thing about the mind is if you start asking a question, the mind will start generating possible solutions, and it usually does it subconsciously. If we don't ask the question, we're not going to get the answer. So the next step is the thinking phase, and that is where you brainstorm everything that came to mind when you asked the questions. Kind of like I do a big kind of mind map, kind of a big, out. Once again, I write it all down. You don't go, oh, that's stupid. You just go, no, I'm writing it. And then you need to do the O, which is hopefully one solution will stand out to you. If it doesn't stand out for you, you pick one. And remember, and as Heather was saying, we don't always get it the first time, so you try again. So if you picked a solution and it didn't work, it doesn't mean the process doesn't work. It means, oh, that's one less thing I need to try now. I'm going to go back and I'm going to pick something else, which is the definition of how you build resilience. Yep? You don't let yourself get down and don't come back up. Then the D is decisions for your solution, and that is, when am I going to implement it and how am I going to implement it? Because we might come up with a solution, but then we procrastinate on implementing it. Excuse me a minute. So that's the D. And the A is act. Act on it. And part of that also is act on it and review it. Did it give you the outcome that you were after? And the Y stands for your reward. And your reward can be either intrinsic, and that's the best kind because you feel so awesome when you've solved it.
I was waiting for chocolate.
No, that's the extrinsic. So the extrinsic version is you can give yourself a little something, a little treat. I save the treats for the massive problems. Yeah, that's what I do. And it's interesting because my this son of mine I was telling you about, he says to me, don't tell me it's that feeling in here. I'm like, well, you got it. You already know that. That's the reward. Because once you know how to do this and you go to a process and you repeat, all of a sudden you're a master of problem solving and you're a master of resilience. And really, it's about getting up one more time, then you fall down. It doesn't mean that we're always going to be, I'm amazing, I solve problems. It goes like this. Yep. And so that is really what I hope people glean from my book, the process and the tools to be able to go, I do that. And let's see how it goes. All right, so what we're going to do now is talk about resources. And just before we do, I just want to remind you to start thinking about your questions that you've got, because we are here to answer those questions. We're going to have 10 or 15 minutes to be able to answer those questions. And so just to get you to start thinking. So our next question is, where can parents find more books that might support their children with resilience? And I'm going to throw this to Heather and Stef. And we might just click on the next slide, if that's okay, Tim. Thank you.
Okay. Were you going to go first for this?
Yeah, I'll talk to a couple of publishers, Heather. So, so there are some book publishers that specialise in children's books on issues that matter. Toy Mountain is published with EK Books, and they do have books based on specific themes with tools and strategies to support children through challenges and problems and issues. They have themes such as diversity, health and well-being, relationships, what else is there? Change, and the environment, which is the theme that Toy Mountain fits under. There's some really tough topics in there too, and some of the books that they tackle. Pair of Hope is a book about a child with cancer and her recovery from that, and it's reflected through a pear tree that she grows. She loses her hair, and she watches this pear tree grow as she starts to blossom again after her chemotherapy. There's some quite niche books in there as well. Mama's Chickens is about a parent with early onset dementia. And another book I'd recommend is, it's an award-winning book, The Boy, the Bear and the Bully. So that's about bullying, and in all these books there's tips and strategies that kids can pick up from them.
I was going to say there's another one called Turning Cartwheels, which is also on bullying for kind of primary school age children, where I think it starts, sadly, kicking in as an issue. Yeah, bullying is a big one. I'm also published with New Frontier Publishing, so is Heather. Their mantra is they publish books that educate, uplift and inspire. So there's a whole multitude of books there as well that cover all sorts of emotions and resilience building strategies. Wombat Books is next on the list. Happy Pants is published by Wombat Books. It's part of a empathy book pack that you'll find on the Wombat Books website, and that also includes books about dementia, adoption and cerebral palsy.
And I've also put a resource up there. There's a website address for Children's Books Daily. Now, Children's Books Daily is a very popular children's book blog run by Megan Daly. Megan Daly is a Australian literacy advocate and a very well-known school librarian. I think she's probably got about 50,000 subscribers to her website, and she's very well known in the children's kidlit writing industry. And she's also a self-proclaimed grief expert, so she's got some fantastic resources on grief. And she lost her aunt, her brother and her husband in a short period of time, very close together, and she had 2 little ones. So she has some fantastic resources So she actually has book lists by theme that you can search for, and interviews with authors, blog posts on specific topics, and there's a podcast as well.
She's also, you'll find on that website, there's a Facebook group that's attached to it called Your Kids Next Read. And if you join that group, you can ask whatever you like, really, on that Facebook group about whatever book you're looking for. So you can say, I need a book for a kid aged about 5 who's dyslexic, or, whatever the issue is. And there's like heaps of children's authors that follow the page.
And
so you'll
and
get
the school librarians
yeah,
too.
so you'll get all these people chiming in, and you can even say, my kid's 8 and they've just finished Harry Potter, what should they read next? That sort of thing. So I find it a very good resource. Yeah. The other one and I think I mentioned it before, is We Need Diverse Books. If you just look that up on the net, you'll see that's quite a big movement, and there's all sorts of different books about different issues and different people that are listed there.
And we've listed some support groups as well, which relate to some of the themes in our books. And on their websites, there's also a resources tab on most of these websites with recommended reading lists as well. So there's some excellent ones there. We've got homelessness, anxiety and depression, and there's also the climate change, anxiety, and food allergies, of course. Yeah, the Celiac Society has some great resources there also. And Sally, did you want to share some resources?
Yeah, I will actually. So when kids are diagnosed with a food allergy, they need to be resilient. Yeah, so first of all, they need to learn about that allergy, and then they need to grow that resilience muscle. And these are 2 books that actually deal with that. So the first one is Food for Me is Gluten-Free, and it's about how kids manage a gluten-free diet and being a celiac. It actually stars my own kids, so it was a story written actually for my son. And in fact, it then became very much sought after, and is all around the world now, which is just fantastic, because it's also about inclusivity and diversity. So it includes education for kids who don't have a food allergy. What do I need to do when I'm around the kid with a food allergy? I don't just not play with them. I don't just not sit with them. And the other one is about nut allergies and anaphylaxis. So this is the second book in the Food for Me series. Food for Me must be nut-free, so along the same lines. And I got asked to write so many. Oh, could you write one on dairy? Can you write one on eggs? I mean, honestly, the list is growing now. It's growing and growing and growing, and we could write lots of them, but essentially those kids need to be able to become resilient around that, because it is it's a diversity, or what I call a diffability. But actually in the book we just normalise it once again and talk about everybody has something different about them. It's just that yours happens to be, I can't eat this food because it will make me sick. So lots and lots of kids' books on so many different topics about building resilience and building emotional intelligence.
And just to add to what Sally alluded to as well, so these books aren't just for the child who has particular anxiety or problems to build resilience to. They're also there to create for other children to have empathy to classmates, family members as well, and what they're going through as well, and to be able to express what they're feeling as well, and have those discussions with whoever they're reading the book with.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, Food for Me is Gluten-Free is about a family where some people are celiac and some aren't. Yeah, so that's about, there's a no choice here. how we navigate this. And so, in fact, the other family members also need to be resilient and respectful. And as Stef said, this was actually the first ever children's picture book about celiac disease in Australia, and I was involved in a lot of presentations on celiac. So the Australian Celiac Society have that book, and Anaphylaxis Australia also do a lot of promotion, and this is one of the books that they recommend as well, and it's continuing to grow, even those two as well. So that is our piece on resources. We hope it's been really helpful. Thanks, Stef and Heather, because you're a plethora of information, and very much appreciate you sharing that. So it's time to hear your questions and answer them. So what I would like to do is just call on somebody to hand the people a mic, and we'll just wait till the mics come. So we might go here, and if you just want to ask, say who your question is for. Is it for Stef, Heather, or Sally, or is it for anybody?
Is it on?
Yes, it is.
on. Okay. Thank you very much. First of all, an extraordinary number of really interesting insights and information there. I couldn't help wondering, though, how this session would have been if the three of you were Iranian, or you were talking, there was no mention in your books, or you'll speak of a black child or a non-Anglo child. And for many of them, resilience isn't about owning an emotion, it's about survival. And not just physical survival, but survival as self, as a person. And I'm wondering whether you have any resources or that you know of. I know of a couple of people who are writing books for those kinds of children. But the danger is that we separate them, that we have Australian children and Anglo children, that somehow you're talking about this diversity group. I would hope that it includes some ethnicities, and also children who have survived and seen things no child should ever have seen, and who have people who've recently been in detention centres, for example. That's another whole field. I'm not going to answer it here. I'm just making a plea, I guess, that in our discussion of resilience and survival and tools for children and books, that we remember those as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think we've got a question over here as well.
I guess I'd just make the comment on that. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Own Voices movement. So for Stef and I, as you rightly point out, white Anglo children's authors, many publishers would be of the view that it's inappropriate for us to tell those stories. Yes. Sure, that's what I would say. Yes, yes. Yes, yes, yeah.
Absolutely, and some of the difficult topics that we do present in our books, these are our own voice stories. Yeah, so when I wrote the book, which is A Home for Luna, which at a deeper level does create conversation about the refugee crisis, I did use animal characters because they're universal. And yeah, absolutely. And it's a reflection of my own experience where I was in a foster home and was homeless for a short period of time in my adolescence years when my mother had a mental health breakdown. And yeah, so, you know, it is an own voice story about homelessness and change, but with animal characters so that it is more universal. And it is very tricky to tackle these deep topics and present them in a way that children can feel comfortable with also. But certainly there are other own voice stories out there which will tackle some of those very sensitive topics, but yes, certainly would be written by someone that is in the appropriate position to write them.
Hi, I've got so much out of listening to the three of you today. Thank you very much. I'm an educator. I've also had a mental health journey, including prenatal depression 31 years ago, when it wasn't very recognised at the time in Geelong. And like you, I lived in Melbourne and came to live in Ocean Grove. One thing that I was going to also suggest as another resource was SANE.
Oh, yes.
They are fabulous. And the other comment I wanted to make was, has anyone seen the Magda Zabansky shows on ABC in the last 3 weeks about food and health?
No. Tell us more, please.
Okay, the last one was on during the week. Can get it on iView. It's all about depression and resilience, and I've been part of this study from the Food and Mood Centre at Deakin.
Yep.
Yep, have you heard about that one? They're now saying that the gut and the brain are connected, and I was part, I think I'm allowed to say this because it's finished now, I was group 13, which was the last group that went through, and they talk about this on the show. And they're talking about, well, there's a lot of information, but there was the last episode was all on mental health and the pandemic and children and adults and how it's a crisis. And they, well, for me, because I've dealt with mental health issues for so long, they showed a visual representation in a field in Melbourne somewhere, and they had all these little figures, and they were blue, I think, and then they had all these red ones sort of scattered between them. And Magda was standing there, as she does. She was the person that was narrating the show, and it was going through her health challenges too. And they're talking about 1 in every 2 people in Australia have some sort of disability. And she said, you're probably wondering why I'm on here representing health. But it showed, the 3 episodes go through her journey. And, excuse me, she's also had a mental health problems and diet problems since she was in her teens.
Right. Yeah. Look, thanks so much for sharing. That's really interesting. And if people want to know further, then we know where to go.
Yeah, there is just to add to that, there's an emerging trend in publishers championing body image picture books for children, and it's changing the language and views of children. So to stop using the word fat, it's not in the picture book vocabulary anymore. It is all about loving your body, loving who you are, and embracing all the different ways that, all the different shapes and sizes that we are. So there is certainly some changes afoot there as well, which will hopefully educate and inspire a new generation.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you, ladies. It's been so lovely to sit and listen to you, and even to be in a space with other humans as well, like not watching it on Zoom.
Strange, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I have 2 questions for all of you. The first one is, it's a bit, well, they're both curious questions. I'd love to hear about your writing spaces, like where do you write? I'm fascinated by that. And also, I'm interested to know how do each of you manage your mental health?
Ooh.
Oh.
Well, Sally's obviously got it all covered.
I'm going to answer first, it looks like. Where is my writing space? Oh, you know what? When I get an idea and I have a message that needs to be said and shared, then my writing space is wherever I happen to be. So you will find me with a notebook. You will find that notebook in my car, next to my bed, at the dinner table, scribbled on. You will find me in the middle of the night with the light of my phone, trying not to wake my husband. And so essentially, where am I? I'm in the now with the story and the message. Yep, so I don't go to a space or place. I carry that with me. And sometimes I actually invite my family to contribute as well. Yeah, so largely, well, it will particularly with this this book, because this was the voice of the celiacs and I'm not one. So the language in this came from them, my son and my daughter, because we had 3 people diagnosed in our family in 3 weeks, and it was 20 years ago, so our world got turned upside down. So that is where that came from. So I do invite them. So it's I guess it's a collaboration, really. In answer to how do I look after my own mental health, I do refer to this little red Bible, as some people call it. I think it's about noticing and paying attention to certain areas. So one of them is sleep. And in fact, we've got new language around that now, and we call it sleep hygiene. I don't know who's familiar with that, and it's just such a more empowering use of language, because just like we shower our body or bathe our body to make it clean, that's what sleep is as hygiene. Sleep hygiene actually cleanses our physical body, our mental body, our psychological body, our spiritual body, when we're asleep. So that's particularly important. Exercise is on my agenda. Unfortunately, yes, the river's been closed, hasn't it? So what does that mean? That's meant being creative. In fact, one day my eldest daughter and I walked up and back a short strip of the river, and she said to me, "Mum, do you know we walked 6 Ks?" And we just needed to chat. Exercise, diet, absolutely. The research that you're talking about is out there, and it's profound and it's evidence-based. Yeah. So my mantra is you are what you eat. So I follow largely a whole foods diet, or the 80-20 rule. Mindfulness, breath work, checking in and asking how am I feeling, and just practicing emotional intelligence, really. Just being really mindful, practicing what I talk about. That's me.
Thanks, Sally. Shall I go next? Yeah. I've got a desk in the kitchen, which is kind of good and kind of not. But anyway, yes, I've got a desk in the kitchen, and I write there, and I write at the dining table, and a bit like Sally, I write sort of everywhere. And yes, I also bounce things off my family quite regularly. They get a bit sick of it sometimes, but anyway, that's another story. I'm still on medication for depression. I probably will be for my life. That's just my genetic makeup. In fact, he's off it now, but there was a time where our entire family, including the dog, was on antidepressants, which we all have a bit of a laugh about. Yeah, Pip. That's Pip. Yep. Pip's off now. Can't say much for the rest of us, but that's okay. And yeah, exercise and choir. I love my choir ladies. That is a beautiful coming together at the well of a bunch of women and we sing and we laugh and we cry, and it is therapy. It's great. And walking the dog, exercise. I think one of the big things that I've learnt over my mental health journey is to be kind to myself. So the diet question, I do have a big weakness for sweet treats. So, chocolate-coated macadamias are my favourite at the moment. And reading baths are something that I do quite a lot. Just in summer, reading in the hammock, just nice things for myself, and that works well for me.
I just had this thought that maybe I need to write a book about being a resilient writer, because for years I did not have a writing space. I had a sewing desk in the corner of a wardrobe that I would get up early in the morning when our son was quite small, and he also is on the autism spectrum, ADHD, so once he was up, he was on. So there was no writing during the day, but I'd get up in the dark and I'd write at this desk in the wardrobe.
Sounds
just
like
for
Harry
a
Potter.
very short period of time. And then once I went back to work, I commuted to Melbourne, so I had this train time, which was writing time. So I'd write in these very short, sporadic bursts. Never at the end of the day, though. I was too exhausted. I feel exhausted just thinking about how I actually got up early and so early. And I'm talking 5 a.m. We'd get up and write for an hour. But I now... and then I'd also go for walks and just do some dot points for ideas, or even if I was trying to find a rhyme for something, I'd just record it on voice recorder on my phone. Because you can lose these ideas really quickly. Like, you've just got to write them down. So if you don't journal, like the good old voice recorder on the phone, it's just instantaneous. So it took me a little while to establish a more formal writing process. Now I actually do have my own study, you'll be pleased to hear. Only just recently as well, so we're talking for about 7 years. That's the way that I operated, on the train or in this corner, the naughty corner of the wardrobe, just wherever it was quiet. But even when we ended up doing an extension on a house for the study, I made sure that I didn't look out on a window. I need a very blank space. When I'm writing, I'm all business. So just very, very focused on writing. So that's sort of how I operate with that. Everyone has a different process though. So, and it can change and evolve. When I first started writing quite seriously, and I've written novels, they haven't been published, but a lot of energy goes into novels. I have to have these word counts and really be quite harsh on myself. But I think you do have to be kind to yourself when you're writing, and allow yourself some days off, but try and keep your momentum up, and it's okay to do things in short bursts. It's very mentally exhausting writing, takes a lot of focus. And saying that though, it is my mindfulness practice, I have discovered. It is absolutely my mental health practice. I've figured out over time I am a confident introvert. So I can come to these events and speak quite openly, but then I'll be socially exhausted and have to go away and read a book or do some writing. Writing for me is my mental health therapy, and it could be just a poem for myself. I do a lot of writing for myself. It doesn't mean that it's going to get published. Sometimes something does come out sporadically, which has some potential commercial appeal, but mostly I write for myself.
Thanks. I'm very mindful of the time.
I think there was one
There
more
was
question.
a question, and I don't like to.
Can we take one more question?
Is that okay? Beautiful.
Hi, sorry about that. 2 questions. One, is it important to embed the idea of resilience even in memoir? And secondly, can a child be exposed to too many books of issue-based?
Oh, issue-based.
I'll answer the second question first. I don't think so. I think children, when it comes to books, are self-selecting. So if they're not, particularly with picture books, if they're not enjoying it, they'll just shove it aside, bring on the next one. So I don't really think that's a problem. Sorry, what was the first part of the question?
I was going to say the natural narrative arc and structure of your story will have a main character who, at a pivoting point in the narrative arc, will have that. You've got to have that internal character struggle and how they change within themselves in response to adversity. It's part of the hero's journey of most plots. Yeah.
A great one, I don't know if you've come across David Sedaris. Yeah. So he writes about, all sorts of difficulties, but there's always a kind of hook or a joke at the end. It's like, and he's come out kind of more, with more wisdom and more insight and able to laugh at himself or whatever the situation is at the end. So, yeah.
And just adding to what Heather said, children will pick whatever books that they feel like. Kids should just read for fun as well, absolutely. Captain Underpants, the Treehouse books, humorous books, absolutely.
That's something I'm very passionate about. I've worked as a bookseller for quite a few years, and the number of parents that come into me and say, oh, they like these graphic novels, but I want them to read a proper book now. And I'm like,
Reading's reading, isn't it?
Yes, and the minute you try to discipline your child's reading is the minute that reading is going to become a chore, and that is the last thing you want. So, yes, I'm very much about children choosing their own books. I think that's really important.
And I'll jump into that conversation as well. I think that issue-based books can be read for different purposes. So kids can read an issue-based book but not even realise they're reading an issue-based book. They just love the characters or they love the story. So I think that if there is a need to go deeper, they will ask questions. So I think it's important not necessarily to classify books as issue-based. It's just these are books. I love these. However, I think it's really helpful when there is something going on. For example, I'm just going to talk about grief, that you can hunt out a certain book and present that to a child and say, we're going to read this, and in fact we might go have a little chat about it. Yeah, I think if you're going deep every single time, that's overwhelming, and that's not the purpose of issue-based books. And I agree with the what Heather and Stef have said about the memoir, because the resilience or whatever the character strength is going to come out in the journey and in the story. I don't think people can feel it. Yeah, I know. I don't think so necessarily. Yeah, I think if you look at it back on it, it will be there. There'll be a thread throughout. Yeah. So just to finish off, I'm wanting to ask each panellist, what is your sort of takeaway message to our wonderful audience, if there was one thing you wanted to leave them with, what would it be, Stef?
Children are like little sea sponges. They soak up everything around them. And so let them embrace their curiosity and guide them through reading to get the answers that they're looking for.
Thanks. Heather?
Nicely said. I would invite everyone to just share books with kids. It doesn't have to be an issues-based book. I think books are magical, and if we can create readers, then we will have a brilliant future.
Absolutely. And mine would be around normalising, for example, picking up a book that says Overcoming Problems and normalising that, because as human beings we solve problems every single day. And so just, being courageous and starting the conversation around that as well. In fact, switching the narrative to that's just something normal. This is what I'm reading. And at the end of the day, of course, it is about growing the emotional intelligence and resilience. And so my other message is that as an adult, keep on learning, keep on reading, keep on learning. So what I'd like to do is finish up, and I'd like to thank Heather and Stef for a wonderful, engaging discussion. Thank you so much for your time and your insights and knowledge and your beautiful books.
And thank you, Sally.
Thank you. Today's event has been recorded, so if you'd like to watch or listen to this discussion again, or you'd like to recommend it to family or friends, it will be uploaded to the library's YouTube channel within the next couple of days. I would also like to let you know that the showcase bookseller is Torquay Books, and they've got a little pop-up bookstore on the ground floor on Quay Kirinish, operating all day here today. And you can purchase books by all of the local authors featured in Local Word, including back copies and previous titles. And just to let you know, Heather, Stef and I will be down there after this panel discussion wraps up. If anyone wants to, have a chat or is interested in us signing a book, we'll be there for the next half hour or so. And the other thing is to remind everybody that many titles of presenters in this Local Word do have books that are available in the library for you to loan. So it's just a wonderful opportunity. So I want to finish off by thanking the Geelong Regional Libraries for hosting today's panel discussion, and thank you all for attending and for being such an engaging, interested audience. And we would like you to enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much.